Hey everyone, I'm back to continue the discussion in the playlist, the JodyVision, regarding going into visionary state and the event of meeting Frontline Assembly in 1998. Now, it'd be a big help if you've been following and listening to my stories, but just briefly, I'm going into visionary state where when you're in visionary state, you can't really tell it apart from reality at the moment. Kind of like you can tell you've just woken up from a dream, right? So, um, up until this point, I've talked a little bit about 1998 seems to be kind of when the vision started coming back really strongly, and the year that I turned 23, which is also known sometimes as the number of magic. And so before the vision started picking up, that's when I think I was just really depressed. I quit my jobs. I felt that I was being attacked by a spirit being, so I did another video discussing out-of-body combat, and so I've been dealing with depression for a long time already, and just kind of feeling like nothing's working out for me, and that I don't have much to look forward to, just really wanting to give up and thinking, maybe I should try Bill Lieb and see if this is somebody who's going to remember me. I feel like I just want to give things one more chance, and if this doesn't work, then nothing ever will. So it's not like it was all on them. Like, I mean, for a lot of reasons, I just felt like nothing's ever going to work for me after meeting them, and super depressed. So that's what I want to point out. I think it's interesting that, it seemed like I had that being that I was fighting out of body, and then I got those two visions, one from Jason, one from Rosie. Then I went to see the concert, but after seeing the concert, I just felt like I did not make the connection, and I never will. I don't think Bill Lieb knows who I am, and I don't think he's the person I'm looking for. So I'm pretty bummed out, So I think between this show in November and December, where I went down to see my dad's during Christmas, I got a phone call that I think it was another visionary slate, because I'm pretty sure I called or talked to my sister about this, and the call never happened. And so she called up and asked me if I remembered Billy. And she said, he's this old friend of mine who wants to marry me, and that he's a really nice guy. She said he's going to drop off a truckload of chocolate-covered cherries at Grandma's. But she also brought up some time ago where my dad tried to beat him up or tried to kill him, and I'm not sure exactly what she said about that event, but I was just trying to picture, growing up, who named Billy would my dad have tried to beat up? Because there was, this crazy older guy that had a lot of animals in his yard, and there was this other younger kid that I might have fooled around with, and couldn't put my finger on it yet. So it's like, maybe I needed some hopeful news that somebody wanted to marry me. And actually, in that phone call from Rosie, she mentioned that I had a soulmate and he wants to marry me, but I need to write to him or I'll never see him again. And by the way, I asked Rosie, what do I need to do? And she's like, you don't really have to do anything but write them and then just be available, And so I'm getting hopeful news from my sister now, and still finding it hard to believe that Billy, even though the person she said is Billy is the same person as Bill Lieb, with everything that's been thrown at me, I'm still like, nah, he's not. So it's just ironic. So I just really wanted to make sure I get that in order. That maybe I'm going through a really depressing time, and then this is the good news I need, right? I need something to make me have something to look forward to. Maybe that's what it was for. Who knows? So again, making each video, trying to lay down as many details as I can remember, and then we'll go back and look it over. Maybe someday I'll have better insight. So like, I have way better clarity than I've had in a long time, but we're still not through with this yet. It's still fun to reflect and examine my experience with the visionary state. So now when I go to Florida, my dad was living near Key West on Big Coppet Key. So our first home was over on, it was originally Gulf Drive, but they changed it to Ed Swift Road because the guy who paved it wanted his name on it. I'm trying to think, though, when I lived at that house between the age of 6 and 12, that's when I had that little boyfriend named Billy. And then we moved over to the house on D Avenue. And so I quit seeing Billy, but I used to go by his house all the time, and I'd think of him. And so anyways, my dad was still living at that house, and he wanted me to go over and bring the landlord his rent check. And when I used to live down there, I would go over there and bring the rent check and chat with her. She was a nice older lady who used to be a school teacher. And this time, I think when I was at her house, I must have went into a visionary slip, and she started bringing up stuff that was kind of unusual. I kind of realized it was an odd conversation because she asked me if I remembered Billy from up the street, and she said that he was part of a special education program. And then she also talked about the neighborhood as a place where artists are brought up. Now, Key West is known to have an artist community, actually, like the Hemingway House and all that stuff. Lots of artists go to live there. And on Big Coppitt Key there, where I live, the roads were named A through G Avenue and 1st through 4th Street. Can't remember a whole lot about the conversation, except that after a while she said, "Jody, are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know." I did feel like something was kind of weird going on. And then she said, "It seemed like I was gone for a while, so I don't know if that means I disappeared in front of her." I'm kind of thinking more that I blanked out. Now, later on, I had a friend who said she had the type of epilepsy where you don't fall down and shake all around because, that's when your brain just kind of like everything's going off. There's the kind of epilepsy where everything shuts off for a moment. And in her case, she'd go to visionary state. So she was a little kid and she saw herself when she was older and stuff like that. So this is somebody I met years later. And I shared my story with her. So this is an instance where I can reflect and think I could have had a type of an epileptic seizure in front of her, that I blanked out in front of her. Anyways, the way my dad had my old room laid out, you come in a door. So this is kind of like the wall to the outside and the window here, and then the head of the bed is up to the wall, so you have to walk along the bed, between the bed and the wall. And then towards the dresser with the mirror that's leaning up against that wall. And so I was sleeping back there, and I kept hearing this tapping noise over in that corner where that dresser was. So I was looking all around trying to find it. I even went outside in the back and looked around in the backyard to figure out what that noise is. I could not put my finger on it. So I don't know if it went away, if I just went to sleep. I just thought, well, I'm just going to try not to let it bother me. I'd like to think there's a physical explanation, but I had a funny feeling it was like a poltergeist or something. And then one night the trailer was rocking side to side because it was really windy and the mirror fell off, right? So that makes a lot of sense. But the weird thing is, it felt like something went by me. I felt kind of like it was almost like a big presence. I could almost see its indentation against the backdrop. So I don't know if my eyes were open, but I just felt that I saw kind of a shadow being moved across the wall. The shadow being moved across the room before the mirror came off the dresser and broke. So again, my dad said, well, it was a windy night, and I didn't think he believed me, and however, I did spend the rest of my visit sleeping on the couch in the living room. So I was packing up and getting ready to take that trip to Miami and catch the plane back to Colorado. So I'm in my old room packing when my dad came back to tell me about a story he was reading. Now, my dad likes to read a lot of books, especially about World War I and II and the whole Nazi regime, right? So it sounded like kind of one of his typical stories at first, and he started out telling me that it was a story about an Austrian general who had a prearranged marriage with his wife, who he would be introduced to by a form of time travel at the age of 6. And now this general was able to see her throughout her life and see her at different ages by going by this form of time travel. And at one point he even had a chance to make love to her at a young age as a teenage boy. Now, when he was telling me this story, it almost seemed familiar, but I couldn't quite put my finger on some of the information he was giving me till later. Kind of like what he said right there. I figured out, oh, that's right. That was the vision when I was like 11 going on 12. I went over to Juan's house and met Billy there. That's when he was a teenager making love. And just a couple other things to that extent that, sometimes maybe he's able to see me from time travel, but I don't know. So that's kind of scary. It's like, oh, wow. So not that it's scary, but just to think like he could have been in the parallel dimension exploring my apartment without me knowing, for example. I think that's what he had brought up, like that maybe that was one of the paranoid parts of the story, is that he had seen how she lives and just thought, she lives like a slob. He really wants her to clean up her act and stuff like this. And so when I started remembering this, so about a year later, I started remembering this whole story, and it was like kind of like, man, people have been trying to tell me all these years, and my dad's been giving me all this information, and I started worrying about somebody actually been going in my apartment and spying on me, because of this. So this is where, again, I think going into visionary state and stuff, this might be a thing in itself. So if there's any psychosis, that sometimes this can be a psychosis-inducing experience itself. But again, that's why I'm trying to like point out, like, what if this is how a spirit can haunt you and stuff like that. So again, back to my story about my dad. So let's see. So some of the stuff he told me was like that he was getting messages from her quite a bit, and he really appreciated them. Sometimes they were long messages. Sometimes he wouldn't hear from her for a while. Sometimes she'd say really nice and kind things, and sometimes she'd say things that are kind of harsh and critical. But the thing is when she says that she loves him, but anytime he gets to talk to her in person, she seems like she can't say it. So okay, again, a year later, I'm starting to think, I remember the story, but it didn't make sense because whoever he's talking about, I'm clearly not in touch with. So I think I may have been told that the guy will come and marry her all at once, without really getting to know her first, but he in fact has already been getting to know her all these years, like maybe throughout the time travel things, just had a way of getting to know her without her knowing it. And I think Rosie might have even mentioned that too, that he would just come to me and marry me or something. Right. So again, it's like I'm not hearing what they're telling me, right? But let me see. Before the end of the story, though, I think my dad said something like, and then they're gonna like take her somewhere and beat her up for the stories that she's been telling. And so when I started remembering that, it kind of made me feel kind of scared. Like, oh, really? They're gonna take me somewhere and beat me up? Right? So yeah. So if I remember any more of this story, I think those were some of the key points in the story, that the Austrian general of an army. So the Austrian army general. There was a general named Wilhelm Lieb. He was an Austrian man that was a general for the Nazis, but it is said that he was a good Nazi. He didn't support the bad stuff the Nazis were doing. So Bill Lieb is a stage name by any chance. Maybe that's why. So it makes me wonder why he would choose a stage name the same as a Nazi general. And then the next question is, maybe that was his birth name, but since his wife never changed her last name, it makes you wonder. And so Willem Schroeder, that's because they nicknamed him after the Peanuts character. And then there's Baldus van Vuren, might have been a joke and a play on words, which we'll get down to later. And then there's Bob. So again, another funny coincidence. So that's where the visionary state, the beings that I'm communicating with, they seem to be very intelligent and they have a great sense of humor. And so if I'm not being attacked, then I'm being educated for sure. This is a form of education and a way that information can be shared. And they say what doesn't hurt you makes you stronger. So like if whatever's being done to me is meant to be amazing, crazy making experience, then I think I handled it pretty well. Now there are experiments or programs out there where they're trying to mess with I don't know, like mind control experiments. And there's an online community of people called Targeted Individuals. And the reason for that is they're doing such a poor job of it. I mean, it's being done so crudely that they're all catching on and able to share their stories. And so there's a lot of certain signs, it's happening. But I think mine's being done on a much higher level, so that makes it a little more intimidating if you don't know who it is or where it's coming from, because it's definitely out of my hands. I mean, I've watched a lot of interesting movies growing up, but I don't think I have a creative enough imagination to think the stuff up. So again, let's see here. Just before I finish the video, I kind of think, Yeah, I think there was a being that kind of dragged me out of my body, so there was a shadow being. Had some visions. I went to the show, and that's where I figured, like, there's no way in heck that me and Bill are ever going to make a connection. But then getting this phone call from my sister telling me I have this old friend named Billy that still loves me, and he's a very nice guy. And then there's wants to ask me to marry me, right? So, and then going to my dad's house, the landlord, she told me I had this friend named Billy, part of a special education program. Something I forgot about Jason is he also said there was a little kid named Billy that was part of a special program meant to keep this girl from committing suicide, right? So, see, that's where sometimes I forget stuff like that. So that's where I'm just thinking, well, I was getting really depressed. Maybe I needed some good news. And then at my dad's house, there seemed to be a shadow being that threw the mirror down, although it was just really windy. But then having him tell me about the book he was reading was very interesting. I think that comes back to Jason again. He brought up there's a book being written about me, and I might get a chance to read it someday. So I think while I was in the middle of that story, my dad was telling it to me. I had a funny feeling this was the book Jason was talking about too. But again, these visionary slips happen, and then you sort of put it on the back burner till later. So anyways, I don't want to make this video too long, because the last time I made a video, it took me all day to upload it. So anyways, I'll try to see if I can give smaller chunks of my story as I go. I'll talk to you soon. You guys have a fun day.